think that there's sectors or industries that are particularly vulnerable as we go into 2023?
I think there are business models that are particularly vulnerable. And I think that may be a little different than industries because there are multiple business models within single industries. I think that there is a sustainable competitive advantage in companies that embrace and engage with technology. That's not a new statement. But we got a lot of proof statements for that during the pandemic. Those companies that were able to pivot hybrid and pivot to technology, whether it was hybrid or not, had a competitive advantage. And you can find that in almost any industry. So a lot of our investment thinking, when we think about building portfolios, private companies or public companies for that matter, is to ask the question, are these companies that are either technology enabled, or better yet, are they companies that are technology enablers? Or are they creating that technological competitive advantage elsewhere? The other advantage that I've seen again and again, and I started my career as a direct investor in public equities, both here in the States and in Europe as well. And this is going to sound a little preachy, but I mean what I'm about to say. Investing at its core is really finding those advantaged companies and where are those competitive advantages. I've only ever encountered one truly sustainable competitive advantage. If you look at the vast history of American public companies, you remember Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. I mean, it's a great book, but it's a little dated because some of those good to great companies aren't great anymore. It's really difficult to get a competitive advantage. The only sustainable competitive advantage I've ever run across is the ability to learn faster than your competition. And I think that may be where, and now I'm going to come back down to earth and quit preaching, that may be where a company that relies on you to better understand its cash flow and better maximize or optimize its cash flow, to me, that's a version of learning faster than your competition. The more efficient use of capital is a mark of a good company. When I talk to our analysts, again, private or public companies, one of the things they focus on real quickly is how do you manage cash flows? Because that could tell you all you need to know. Right? Most of what you need to know about a management team is how they make decisions about cash and how they manage cash and what kind of insight and line of sight they have into the way their cash moves.
Are there sectors or industries that you think are going to be particularly strong in 2023?
Well, I mean, again, that common thread of technology enablement or technology enablers, I think, is important. Secularly, I focus a lot on personal consumption and household spending from a macroeconomic standpoint. But secularly, we're seeing trends that will likely benefit those companies that do business with the consumer on the basis of providing services as opposed to goods. And that's a little bit of a false dichotomy, but we're seeing spending patterns change as we move from the boomers to Gen X to Gen Y to Gen Z to whatever comes next. Alpha, I think, is next. I can't remember. Where there's less of an emphasis on the ownership of goods and more of an emphasis on the ownership of services. And I think this began actually back in the global financial crisis. Many people were raised to think that the path to wealth stability and financial stability was to own a home. Because you owned a home, it was an enforced savings mechanism, and home prices only ever went up, and oh wait, they don't always go up. And so homes, instead of being a tailwind in 2008, 2009, became more of an anchor. And I go back and really trace this shift in spending, beginning of a shift in spending patterns to then where consumers increasingly focus more on services than goods. And that's not binary, obviously, but companies that provide services to consumers are probably better positioned going forward if I had to generalize, but that's a generalization. But
we still have volatility and uncertainty, and our supply chains are operating based on the Herculean effort of the few.
Right.
Our systems don't support just in case. Our systems don't support agility or resiliency. The systems support efficiency and the reduction of fat in the supply chain. As soon as we can get to the point where we feel like we're stable, we will start to re-engineer our supply chains, which will cause the re-engineering of the systems, the processes, and the people that operate them, which represent a huge opportunity for PrimeRevenue and all technology providers across the supply chain.
And so I've always had a healthy intellectual appreciation for free cash flow. It became very visceral in 2008. The ability to be your own bank, to generate your own free cash flow, gives you an added degree of control over your own destiny. And that's kind of cool.
Your portfolio companies and the private wealth management family office and family businesses that you typically talk to, and you're advising the CEO and the CFO, what do they need to do and think about as they look at 2023 to position their business to either weather or take advantage of all of these things that are happening and come out stronger?
Yeah. So I think the answer to both of those variations on that question is to appreciate the value of flexibility. That's always important. That's a little trite, but that's always important. But in a period in which, is it soft, is it squishy, is it an expansion, is the Fed done, is there more inflation, is there less inflation, having the flexibility within your business model, which has cash flow implications as well, to be able to respond to developments in whatever the industry is that the small business is in, I think is very important. I have always thought, and I've thought this in a portfolio, I've thought this at the business level as well, that a lot of, in the investment world, a lot of people are used to thinking of the value of cash as being what they can return on it. I showed you the money market fund. I would encourage businesses to think about the option value of cash. And not to measure it, but to think of it subjectively, but to know that cash buys you some of that flexibility, buys you some time, buys you some patience. And it can be hard as a portfolio manager for a client to say, hey, the markets are going up and you've got all this cash. That can be hard. I mean, you may have to push back against a client or a board. But the option value of that liquidity, he's looking at Charlie, the option value of that liquidity is worth remembering in any environment. But this is financial market theory. The option value of anything goes up in periods of heightened volatility. That's options theory, Black-Scholes model, for those of you paying attention. And so I apply that to real life. I mean, so if there is heightened volatility in your business model or heightened uncertainty or a wider range of outcomes, the option value of that cash and liquidity is heightened.
The best shock absorber for any volatility is always cash.
Yeah. The dysfunctionality, I think we're already seeing this, the dysfunctionality of governments, plural, is in some ways supplanted by the growing functionality of multinational institutions.
What are the key factors that you believe will have the most significant impact on the economy in 2023? And how do you expect these factors to shape the overall economic forecast for the year?
Housing, labor, inflation, interest rates.
Perfect. And cash is king.
Cash is king.
Cash is king. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. PJ, thank you. Thank you all.